Hi everyone, hope you're doing well. I have a short review video that I wanted to bring to you today on this very cool and interesting knife. Yep, that's right, the Yojimbo 2, but not just the plain Yojimbo. This is the carbon fiber version, which was a limited sprint run in 2014. So let's go ahead and take a look here and see what we have. So this is a primarily self-defense design knife from a gentleman named Michael Janich, which I believe is a martial defense expert, blade expert, self-defense kind of guy, and in collaboration with Spyderco, decided to make a self-defense knife. I believe there was a Yojimbo, the first iteration of this knife, and then it was fairly successful, so they decided to do a successor, the Yojimbo 2, which I believe has a little bit larger blade in general, and the handle is sculpted a little bit differently. So let's go ahead and take a look at this guy here. So the first thing you'll notice is that this blade has this striking Wharncliffe blade, and nonetheless, CPM S90V, which I have to say, guys, this is actually the first knife that I had in S90V. I know, hard to imagine, right? After all the knives that I've sharpened for customers over the last year, this is the first knife that someone has sent me in S90V, so it kind of tells me a couple things. One, it's not a very popular steel, that it's not used all that much anymore. And two, it seems that people kind of stay away from it because they've heard that it's difficult to sharpen. And I will be honest with you, this steel has lived up to its reputation. Of all the knives and the steels that I have sharpened, I would say this is probably the most difficult steel that I have worked with. And that's sharpening with silica carbide stones and diamond stropping compounds, which definitely can handle it. They can do the work. So yeah, I don't know. S90V has a lot of vanadium carbide in it. I believe more than steels like S110V, which honestly I don't find to be that difficult to sharpen. But I actually had a conversation with Michael Christie. You may follow him on YouTube. He's a real sharpening guru, and he knows more about some steels than I do. And he was telling me that based on his experience, he found that the Spyderco S90V in his Yojimbo 2 was harder than a lot of other knives in S90V that he had experienced. So this might be the same case, that this knife just has really hard S90V for whatever reason, more than usual. So definitely took me a while. It took a good edge, but it definitely makes you work for it. It's not one of those steels that seems to just get really sharp no matter what you do to it. Something like 154 cm, or like M390 or M4 are kind of steels that it seems like you can really not be too careful with, or kind of sloppy, and you'll still get a very sharp edge. But S90V, it seems that you need to be very deliberate in your sharpening. You need to go through a good grip progression and, take your time. Otherwise, you're not going to get a very fine edge. And the edge that resulted is very good. I would say it is not the sharpest of some of the knives that I've done. But, it's definitely very, very good, which I'll show you guys here in a minute. So, excuse me. Alright, so sorry about that little rant on S90V. I'm kind of a steel snob, as you guys know. So, Yojimbo 2, S90V blade steel, Wharncliffe blade design here. Basically a folding utility knife. Has this really nice peel-ply carbon fiber handles. And I just want to take a second to talk about peel-ply, because for the longest time, I actually did not understand what peel-ply was. I thought that peel-ply was basically a G10 handle scale with a laminate carbon fiber on top of it, and that is not true. That is called laminate carbon fiber. So peel-ply is solid carbon fiber And basically what they do is, through the molding process, they basically press in some sort of a, what's the word I'm looking for? Not a template, but they basically press in a textured piece of material here on top of the G10, carbon fiber, to give it some texture. So if you take a look at this here, you guys can probably see it kind of has a checkering pattern, has a light texture to the finger. Otherwise, it would be very smooth and not have any texture to it. But again, they press something into this, they form it, they mold it to have texture, kind of like sandpaper a little bit, but not nearly as coarse. You can probably hear it if I'm quiet. So it has texture to it. So this is solid carbon fiber, guys, not laminate as some people may think it is. Overall, we have about a 3-inch blade here, which is not, super big for a defensive blade, but apparently based on a lot of the different defensive knife styles and things like that, you don't really need a super long blade. And I believe this knife was designed kind of with a Filipino style of knife defense in mind. I think Michael Janich, a lot of his background is in Filipino type knife fighting defense things. So he went that direction. And if you can see here, I believe they call this a Filipino grip, with your thumb extended way far up here like this. There is no jimping up here, and I watched a video from Mike on this, and he explains that, if you're doing any sort of, defensive type techniques, he doesn't want any jimping up here that may abrade or cause damage to his thumb, when doing something forceful with the knife. So I kind of get that. This gives you a nice, platform up here, and it also won't tear your thumb up. So that's good. That's a nice thing. I believe he also said in his video, this kind of swooping action here can also be used as kind of a control mechanism where you can bring it up along somebody's wrist or hand. It kind of fits in there like that, and you can control them in some way, shape, or form. So I'm not a knife fighter. I never intend to be a knife fighter, so this is just what I hear. This is a compression lock knife, which is the same as the Paramilitary 2, and as you can see there, it's a little bit different. It is a bit more recessed than something like a Paramilitary 2 would be, which I believe they did on purpose, so the knife would not be inadvertently disengaged when you were, doing something with the knife or grabbing it very firmly. There would be less of a chance for you to, disengage that lock. So overall, though, the knife is very smooth. I don't know if you can see that. It's pretty much a free dropper here. Very nice design. The compression lock here is nice, easy, pretty easy to manipulate. I will say though that as a flipping knife, this tab here, since it only extends a little bit, it starts to kind of hurt your thumb and dig into your thumb. So I don't know if you guys can see that there, but after a few minutes of playing with this knife, I realized it's like, oh man, it kind of starting to kind of hurt your finger after a while. And honestly, if you compare that to a Paramilitary 2, oops, sorry guys, bumping my camera. If you look at the amount of locking tab that's exposed there, you can see there's quite a bit of difference. And honestly, the Paramilitary 2 is just a lot more comfortable and easier to disengage. And that really has to do with the amount of cutout that you see there, around that lock. But different purpose. The Paramilitary 2 is not a primarily defensive knife. It's kind of a secondary role for that blade. So, the spider hole is a little bit covered up here. It's a little bit difficult to get the blade out there. It's not impossible. I think I would have liked to see this handle maybe be sculpted out just a little bit more, or maybe the spider hole maybe moved forward just a millimeter or two, just to give you a little bit more on the opening. It's not bad, but if you had gloves on or something, I think you would probably struggle to get this knife open. I mean, if you compare these two, and also look at the size of the spider hole, it's much smaller than on the Paramilitary 2. So, yeah, that's okay. You know, it works, but may cause a little bit of difficulty in some instances. The handle on this overall is very nice. It's very ergonomic. Probably one of the best feeling handles that I've felt. As the knife tapers off here towards the handle, it gets thinner to compensate for the difference in the size of your fingers, and it really provides a good grip on the knife. I would almost prefer to see a handle shape kind of similar on the Paramilitary 2. If they changed the handle design a little bit and kind of tapered it a little bit thinner towards the end, I think that would be more comfortable. I would really like that. So good job there on the handle design. I really like the handle design. No problems there at all. This knife does have steel liners, which appear to be partially milled out. At least the one on the non-locking side has a little bit milled out. Not much, though. It's actually not super milled. So almost full steel liners in there, guys. I didn't realize that until just now. The blade is also hollow ground, about, I don't know, 2/3 of the way up the blade. It does come to a pretty thin behind the edge. Let me just feel here comparing. Yeah, it's pretty thin. It's pretty good. Honestly, it's not as thin as you think it might be. I would say it's pretty similar to this Paramilitary 2. But nonetheless, it's good. It's going to have good cutting performance. Of course, we have this very fine tip, which would pretty much pierce and penetrate just about anything. I don't think there's much that this tip would not go through, and I certainly would not want to find out. So, you guys can see here, I put a mirror edge on this guy. That will come through here on the video. Again, not the easiest steel to work with there, guys. Definitely took some time to get this guy good. So yeah, what else can I say about this knife? You know, it's an interesting design. It's something that we don't see very often. These Wharncliffe type blades are becoming more popular. Is it a knife for me? I think personally, no. You know, I've heard some people say that this knife is a quote Paramilitary 2 killer, but I don't think I agree with that. It's a different purpose. It's built differently. The lock I can't talk. The lock actuates a little bit differently. You know, the ease of opening here with the thumb hole. I've heard people say that the Yojimbo 2 is much smoother than a Paramilitary 2, and honestly, I don't see that. I don't really experience that in my use and comparison of these two knives. So I think they are pretty much equally smooth, you know, from my experience. So yeah, if you guys are looking for, you know, a purpose-built self-defense knife, I think this would be a great option. You know, personally, I'm not one to really be interested in trying to get into a knife fight, but if you had to, I suppose this would work. I heard someone say recently, it may have been Michael Janich, he was talking about, you know, I think it was on the Spyderco forums, talking about different knife designs and lengths. What should you carry for a defensive knife? And very simply put, he said, you should practice any knife training with knives that you plan on carrying on a regular basis, things that you EDC, things that you are familiar with, you know, which makes a lot of sense, because probably when something happens, it's going to be when you're least expecting it. You're not going to maybe always be prepared, and you may just have your EDC knife with you. So whatever you plan on using or carrying daily is ideally what you should use to train with. So if a blade shape like this, you know, works for you, then that's great, you know, go for that. But For me personally, I feel like the Wharncliffe blade is kind of limited utility in some applications. I would prefer a blade more like the Paramilitary 2 that kind of has more belly, more sweep to it, and has an equally fine tip. So I have no doubt that in a self-defense role, these two knives would probably perform roughly equally. I mean, flesh and things are not really that hard to cut, but, you know, given some of the design of this knife here, may lend itself to more of a particular style or tactic, I guess, when you're doing some knife defense. But either way, really neat design. You know, this is actually the only other compression lock knife that I had ever seen in addition to the Paramilitary 2, and it's nice to see a little bit of variety with this particular lock. You know, I think it's a really great lock that Spyderco came up with, and you know, they're slowly starting to implement it into some other knives. You know, the Sage 5 just came out, which has a compression lock, and you know, they've used it a little bit in the past. I'm trying to think of some other knives, things like the Super Leaf and the was it a Super Carahawk or Super Karambit? I'm not sure. I think also had a compression lock on them as well. So, you know, Spyderco has used the lock here and there, but I'd like to see more of it. You know, I think it's a really good design, and it's easy to manipulate. Doesn't require a lot of force. I've been kind of thinking lately that I don't really care for you know, Spyderco's ball bearing lock for a couple of reasons, which maybe I'll talk about in the next video. But I'm gonna wrap this up, guys. Really nice knife here. It was you know, fun to see a Yojimbo 2 in person, and nonetheless a Sprint Run carbon fiber and an S90V. Oh, I almost forgot here. I just wanted to show you guys just a little cut here on the on the paper. Again, I forgot to bring paper, but this is what I could find on the floor. So just to give you guys of the edge on this knife here, let's see what we can do. So it's nice and sharp. So all in all, I think I did pretty good on the S90V. Maybe not my best edge that I've ever done, but you know, this was my first time with the steel, and overall I think it came out pretty good. So hope everyone's doing well. As always, thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you enjoy my channel, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks.